Good evening, dear friends. Before I hand over the floor to Bezalel's president, Professor Eva Illouz, who will present to you our speaker tonight, Nicolas Bourriaud, I would like, on behalf of the faculty and the students of Bezalel's MFA program in Tel Aviv, I would like to thank very warm-heartedly Nicolas Bourriaud for being here and for his exceptional generosity in engaging us all to rethink so profoundly contemporary questions in art. So I'd like to invite now, without further ado, Professor Eva Illouz, who will start us off this evening and who will present Nicolas Bourriaud, who will give about 50 minutes, an hour talk. Yes. And then we could open to the questions and to the public. Professor Illouz.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely happy to be here. This is actually the first time that, as the new president of Bezalel Academy of Arts, I have to present a guest. And I take it as a particularly auspicious augur that the first guest I would have to present to you would be Nicolas Bourriaud, with whom, without knowing him, I feel I share quite a certain number of things which he doesn't know about. One of them is that I share with him one of my two nationalities. I share with him a somehow cosmopolitan fate, curse, I don't know, however you want to look at it. I share with him also the presidency of an art academy. But the analogy between the two of us stops here, because Nicolas Bourriaud, who is the current director of the École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts, is a very accomplished curator, art critic, and philosopher of art, who, as Raphael Zaguri just told us, really brings us, I think, to the cutting edge of thought on contemporary art. So, you know, I could tell you who Nicolas Bourriaud is, and, you know, I could give you a list of his many remarkable accomplishments in his CV. He's the current director, as I said, of the École des Beaux-Arts, and he was a curator at the Tate in Britain. He was also an advisor for the Victor Pinchuk Foundation in Kiev, and has curated many, many exhibits. But someone like Nicolas Bourriaud is undoubtedly much more than a CV or a list of positions, however glamorous they are. He is the author of 3 books. And the one I lived through, who really struck me by, yes, I could say it's brilliance, is Relational Aesthetics. I think it's his first book, 1998 book. And when I was leafing through it, I was reminded, I don't know if you would accept this association which I made, but I was reminded of Heidegger's famous essay on the origins of the work of art. And you remember that in that essay, Heidegger illustrates, as an illustration of the artwork, Heidegger takes the Greek temple. And for him, the temple held up to the Greeks what was important and meaningful in Greek culture. So to quote, it is the temple work that first fits together and at the same time gathers around itself unity of those paths and relations in which birth and death, disaster and blessing, victory and disgrace, endurance and decline acquire the shape of destiny of human being. The all-governing expense of this open relational context is the world of these historical people. In other words, the temple for the Greeks, for Heidegger, the temple for the Greeks focused the moral space of their lives and contained their self-understanding. And I think, in fact, this is what, it's this kind of hermeneutic approach that Nicolas Bourriaud is using in his book, which, as I said, I looked at briefly, Relational Aesthetics. And from what I gather, he views he uses somewhat the Heideggerian conception of art as similar to a cultural paradigm, which collects the scattered practices of a group and unifies them into coherent possibilities for action and holds them up to the people who can act and relate to each other in terms of this exemplar, what has become an exemplar. So works of art, when performing this function of being an exemplar, are not only merely representations or symbols, but actually produce a shared understanding about the world, a shared understanding about the world. And again, it seems to me this is the hermeneutic strategy that is behind Relational Aesthetics of Nicolas Bourriaud, a book which justly sparked very lively debates about the ways in which the artists in the 1990s were working. And I will just conclude and say very briefly, as a sociologist, why I found this book so interesting. The first reason why I found it so interesting is that there is something in his ways of taking and relating to these artists, something of this Heideggerian but also anthropological gesture of trying to find out what is the fundamental world-revealing gesture of a group of artists. This is something we can find definitely in cultural anthropology and the kind of hermeneutic cultural sociology I myself practice. So this I really like very much. And the second thing that I really also, that I felt very close to, was Bourriaud's use of Althusser's materialism of the encounter, matérialisme de la rencontre. The ways in which this is how he applies this notion to this group of artists. Materialism of the encounter, which may seem like a contradiction in terms, because materialism, as you know, is in fact a form of structuralism. That is, it is what is precisely in our encounters is most permanent, stable, predictable in an encounter, whether it is its economic, technological, or geological underpinning. An encounter, on the other hand, is transient, ephemeral, and random. Aléatoire. He calls it also matérialisme aléatoire. So this materialism of the encounter, which characterizes this group of artists which he's talking about, enacts in a way a precept that is at once radically Marxist and radically intersubjective, namely that the world as we know it is a temporary and collective creation, deeply historical, and that this world exists only within the ongoing act of creating and recreating it through intersubjectivity. So, I will leave you only with that. There are many other wonderful sociological and anthropological insights in this book, and it is thus my rare privilege to introduce to you Nicolas Bourriaud. And before I do so, I would like to thank deeply the Institut Français de Tel Aviv for helping Bezalel to make this evening possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if this microphone works. Thank you for being here, and I feel very nicely like if I was in a bistro in Paris, actually. It's absolutely perfect. I will try to reach a deeper level of conversation, maybe, if I can. And yesterday evening, I've been trying to, at Bezalel, in front of the students mainly, I've been trying to determine the common points that were actually